I'm Kelsey Moser, and you're watching Thorin's YouTube channel, where no sandbagging goes unscrutinized.
Right, when you actually came, like we talked about in this off-season, you ended up joining FNATIC. This just shows you, dude, how people really do just like, I mean, I guess the term people often use in the modern day is like retcon. Like you take history now, and based on what happened now, you just rewrite it backwards as like, oh, it was always going to go this way. So like the joke, you'll know this, is now people flame the fuck out of that FNATIC lineup, and they say like the Dardo guy should be fired for FNATIC, and what was he even thinking, and this must have made sense. I remember, one thing I'm pretty good at from my shows is setting the context in that moment. And dude, I remember when this off-season happened, I think everyone agreed with me. Like, FNATIC won the off-season. Like, what? This looked awesome on paper. Like, they had you there. Razork, if people forget, was looking great on fucking Misfits. Humanoid obviously won the championships. Everyone was loving him. Like, he was the biggest talent in Europe at the time. And then you go look at the rest of the team. Like, these are pretty fucking good players. Like, it's almost harder to make a roster like that, if, you know, just on paper, not without knowing how they'll play. If I'm just like a GM trying to make 5 names, dude, that's about almost the best you could manage in that off-season. Did you have a similar sense? Did you actually think it was going to be, like, potentially a champion, right?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, for me, I didn't have much choice to to join like any other team that I wanted. It was kind of like FNATIC or nothing, and I was really happy with how the roster ended up. I mean, on paper, they had like a guy who has been the best support or second best support for most years.
Yeah.
And they had Upset, who was unproven in the terms that he didn't actually win anything, but he was proven in the sense that everyone thought
every player knows he's good, right?
Everyone thought that he was at least top 3.
Yes.
Humanoid, of course, just came off winning everything. I think Razork was the only one where it was maybe a bit more of a question mark, because I mean, having a good split in a worst team and still not accomplishing anything, it doesn't really mean much per se, but it's a good, like, I mean, people like that will get the chances, and they deserve to get the chances to join better teams, right? That's why they're there, right? So on paper, it was a really sick team, yeah. And I think we were pretty good despite all the issues that ended up appearing in the team. I think we would all hold our own at like different points of the year and make cases for why we are actually like good players, even though everyone combined as a team didn't really work out as well as I guess everyone would have liked.
Oh, for sure. Like, put it this way, the other thing about the way that goes, it's actually in general the thing that, I mean, I know it's my specialty is doing like the history and stuff, but I do get a bit irritated by how the narratives go, because the other thing in League is they also do that thing where it's like, if you're bad at the end, like I say, they just make it that you were always bad, and it's like you were secretly bad or something. And people forget, in the spring split, you guys were really good. You were actually one of the better teams. And this is where people really forget. I know later on, Hillesang's game went to shit. Dude, he was like an MVP candidate in the spring. Like, the spring, actually, everything was tracking how it should have been. Like we're talking about, like, really good roster. Let's see how they do in the playoffs. Then people forget, in the playoffs, obviously G2 actually fucked up that first series against you and looked kind of a bit meh, actually. They didn't look like they were going to win the league at all. At that point in time, bear in mind the other team was Rogue, who at the time had never won. I think everyone's feeling was, I think FNATIC just wins the split now. Like, the first split, none of the problems had risen up yet, right? I mean, the first split, everything seemed good.
Yeah, I think the good thing about Spring Split was that even though we had a lot of issues in practice, we were really good at separating that when it came to our competitive stage games.
Right.
Or even, I mean, we were also playing from home some games, a lot of it, right? So when it just came to everything is on the line games. And also, we had not been together for long enough for some players to be affected by what goes on in the day-to-day. Because, I mean, for the first month or so, or 2 months, you don't. I mean, even if going to work is feels like a little bit of a chore because there are annoying things happening, and you can get maybe more prone to get tilted because of shit things happening in scrims or in practice or even just in meetings. It doesn't affect you as much as when it's like you're 7 months doing it. You know, it kind of like becomes a lot worse. And I think spring, because of like the honeymoon and all that we had being a new team and all that, kind of like lessened our problems. Like it was not felt as much, but they were still there. Like we still had like a lot of issues, and most of them came from just in general. I mean, Razork was kind of like like a green player, I guess. Like he was really fresh to playing at the highest level. In Misfits, he was used to just playing his way. He might even have been able to just play muted and do whatever he felt based on feeling, right? He would just play the game. And a player like Humanoid coming from winning 2 titles, where the team plays like pretty structured, and he has a really, really set mind for the game, and he was the one leading that, paving the way for Matt with leading the team in the way that he wanted to play the game. There was for sure like conflict when Razork didn't know where to be on the map in terms of how Humanoid wanted to play the game. And I think more so also because Healy is the kind of the player, probably the support player of how Bippo is off top, where he does a lot of things that are just like spur in the moment feeling for him.
I mean, people always say even his own teammates don't know what he's going to do, right?
Yeah, he doesn't really. He probably doesn't even know himself what he's going to do until like 2 seconds before he does it sometimes. And I think having all this randomness from your support jungle kind of like led to a lot of desync between basically the most important parts of how to play the game early to kind of like lead the game forward, which is your mid jungle support, like taking over the map, making sure that everyone else can play the game. Like of course the game is about bot lane, but how to unlock bot lane also comes through just mid lane being the center of the map and actually being able to allow a lot of things to happen. And we definitely had a lot of issues in that there was just like a lot of conflicting ideas of how the game is supposed to be played, and we had to put a lot of time and effort into kind of like resolving that, because for example, Marek, Humanoid as a personality, he always wanted to like try really hard to make everyone understand what he understands about the game, but then he was also very quick to give up on it if he felt like people were not listening. So
he gets frustrated, right?
Yeah, he would be prone to like getting that. He would get frustrated really quick if he had to repeat himself, and if he had to kind of like be the teacher, you know. So I think that kind of led to a lot of issues within the team. And even then, we still managed, because of like the skill of our players, the willingness to put things aside and just like play the game as it's supposed to be played. And I think Marek also, like Humanoid, stepping up and being the guy, even though he's frustrated, when it actually came to the games that mattered, he would put in the extra effort compared to scrims, where like understandably so, like from a guy from his point of view, if you have to put in your maximum effort, like you're playing a stage game, when it comes to communication, and when he feels like some things should just be done automatically without even having to communicate it, it's things that he didn't really want to do every single game for players like Razork and Tully, who like impacts him the most, right? But it's something that he was willing to do when it came to the stage games. So I think that's like, that's some of the issues that we had in FNATIC. Of course, there was like a lot of issues, but that's like the most glaring one. That is probably the reason also after we actually then faced our first, I guess, real stage defeat, which was the BO5 against Rogue, why things kind of just collapsed, because then it started spilling over, like our scrim culture started spilling over to just everything, and it just blended together, and yeah.
By the way, the question I have about that split goes like this. Like, if people forget, this is why actually that roster on paper, look, I know it might not have worked well together, but what showed me that roster had to have had good players is, like you say, even when it went really badly, like people forget in the summer, there was a period, I think it was like week 6 or whatever, where like you guys weren't even in the playoffs. Like, you were actually going to, for real, miss playoffs, miss Worlds, everything. And then what happened is you basically just almost ran the table. I think you won like 5 of the last 6 games. You got into the playoffs, then you like leveled battled up through the lower bracket, and as you say, at the end, you only really lost to Rogue when Rogue played awesome in that fucking game as well. That was like they played about 2 times better than they were before. So the question I would have is this. One, to me, that shows that the players individually, they have to have hands, they have to have mechanics. But the question I would have is this. You gave a little bit of a hint there, but like, what was the actual vibe inside the team to do this turnaround, go to the playoffs and actually make the run and go to Worlds? Like, was there actually a sense of like, even though, look, maybe this guy doesn't get along with that guy and maybe the team's had problems, was there like a sense of camaraderie though, of like, let's just like put it all aside? Or, I mean, the other thing as well is it did seem like the team was a bit cynical. Like, let's just do specific drafts. Let's do this like specific upset bot lane draft or something. Let's just do what works basically, right?
Yeah, we definitely, in summer, at some point found a formula. I mean, a very predictable formula, but something that just works. I think it's pretty common that in the beginning you want to be the team that does everything, and then once you figure out that you can no longer be the team that does everything, you are just the team that does one thing, but does it to a decent level. I think the reason we did it to a decent level is because we were all good players. So if we can all agree on just one thing, that makes the game playable for us, because it was that bad. Like like everything was just going wrong for us. So if we can just agree on one thing and stick to it, that is like the best chance we had of winning. So that's what we ended up doing in summer. We basically just stuck to like one formula of how to play the game, and there were still issues, but it was easier to band-aid fix those issues with just a way of playing than trying to actually fix the issues themselves. Because we had tried, and that's where all the repetitiveness comes in. Like, we had tried several of the same meeting, repeating the same things, but nothing really seemed to work. So that's kind of was our fix, and it ended up working pretty well. And I'd say even like from practice, we hadn't played against the Rogue team because obviously that was our opponents coming into the semi-final match. But when we played against G2, we felt like this was actually like super winnable. Like, right. G2 didn't look strong at all. This is when they lost to Rogue after we lost to them. But we had like a really, really good game 1 against Rogue. Like, we completely stomped them.
Yes.
And this was like the level that we had actually started showing. And
right.
The sense of camaraderie in the team came together as we were starting to perform better. Like, we were all united. We all knew that we had, like, it was not a good fit at all, but we were all united around the idea that we have found this way of playing the game, these comps that we like to play to kind of mask our issues, and we were all united around this is the reality of the situation, this is how we want to play, and this is the only way that we can win, and that's why we show up to work that it ended up being, because we all fucking hated our lives there, so it just ended up being fucking work, and we were united around like that cause, actually trying to make it work like that.
The funny thing is, even as flawed as this lineup was, and at the time, obviously, everyone was flaming you in the summer when you did this run back and predicting you were going to lose every match. And I know when you guys got to Worlds, there's that ridiculous story where, like, Hila-san couldn't come initially or whatever, and it, like, fucked up the practice. Dude, even in spite of all of that, I think there's a real chance if people go back and watch the games, dude, you could have got out of that group. Like, that wasn't impossible. Like, one, you did clap T1, like, Razork had an awesome game, and then you beat Cloud9, and then people forget that EDG game. Actually, Humanoid was playing great League of Legends. I'll give him credit. Like, there was a world where you 3-0 the start of that group. Did you actually think, like, this was doable? I was kind of shocked. I think people forget that one. Like, these games looked good.
Yeah, I think Worlds for us was a real thing, as what you mentioned, where you do get demoralized on certain teams. And I think definitely playing against, like, this was a big contrast to when I played in G2, because when in FNATIC, we didn't have we were really unfortunate with like the COVID and all that, and us not having like a lot of scrims. But when we did scrim, it was really unproductive scrimming against the Eastern teams. Like, we got completely stomped. And a lot of the issues that we had because our scrims were already bad enough as they were. There was just too much conflict to the point where we had to cut down even on the games of scrims that we played, like a really excessive amount. And it just came down to us, having to pray that we prepared something that we felt like was going to work. And when it comes to draft and all that, and we just had to pray that it was going to be good enough. I had low expectations for how far we could get. I didn't like lose faith in us actually being able to win, but I thought with everything considered, like how bad our scrim practices is, and like just in general everything, that we were not even like the best team from Europe coming into it, and knowing that the Eastern team should be a lot better, also with how bad like the MSI performance was and all that from the West. I thought we were gonna get like a real reality check, and yeah, we got like super demoralized in scrims. But then we actually ended up playing like somewhat decent. I think it was like a fluke maybe from all the Eastern teams week 1. I don't actually really know what happened. But there was a real chance we could have gotten out for sure. I think if we had maybe a little bit of an easier group, or if we had, because I think in the second time around when we played EDG and T1, it was not really close. So if we had won the second game against Cloud9, we had a kind of, I think Cloud9 was the team, the first Western team to like really figure out, actually besides Rogue, who picked like Trundle every single game and just completely countered what the fuck we were doing. But Cloud9, like they kind of just played, at the week 1 we played against them, or the first game, they played like Fiora and like a lot of misfortune, like a 0 damage comp, basically, against like front to back team fighting, which was the kind of what we were, that was our style, you know. But then the second time around when we played them, they were the ones picking like the Trundle jungle and like the front to back. They like ult our front line and they start winning that way, and that was like the only way that we knew how to play.
Right.
So that was kind of like, that's why I didn't have much faith, you know, because if you go into an international tournament and it just takes one team to figure you out, and then you're fucked, right? Like you're not gonna make it far, and that's kind of how it ended for us at that time.
Right, when I say this little quick anecdote, I don't want people to overreact. I'm actually saying this to kind of like highlight Wunder's mentality here. But like, you did once tell me, basically, like thinking of this Worlds, for example, that like, I mean, I get it. In your career, you've won MSI, you've been in the Worlds finals, you've been in semis and Worlds a whole bunch of times. You basically told me one time, like, if it's a year like that where you can't actually do any damage, like that FNATIC team was never going to win. Like, I mean, even if you made it out of groups, you go out in the quarterfinals, that's not even a harsh statement to make. You said on the year like that, you don't even really care if you go to Worlds. Like, it doesn't really matter. Like, you don't really gain anything, if anything. Like, you're just going to get smashed by the Asian teams, aren't you? Like, once you kind of know the game of what the tournament's like, and if you have a chance, it doesn't really matter to you that much if you go to Worlds, if you're going to come like 9th, does it?
Yeah, I mean, of course, when Worlds is in Korea, and like when Worlds is in all these like fun places where you can go to boot camp and you can always like miraculously get like a lot better, you know, then of course it's never like useless to go to Worlds. But I think more so if your team morale is like so fucked already, and there's just no way to make it work with the team, no matter how you like spin and turn it. And then you go to Worlds and you're already like a 3rd seed, or maybe like the 3rd best from your region. Then, yeah, I mean, you might as well just stay at home. Like, if there's like that's kind of true. Like, because we were the better, like we deserved it in terms of like we were the 3rd most skilled team in Europe, but we didn't deserve it. Like, if we played in another region, like this team would never. There was no way this team was going to function. So we didn't actually deserve to be at the tournament. They might as well just have fucking cut the seat, you know, like not make any team. Like that's kind of my mindset about it. Like we just didn't deserve to go, but we ended up going because everyone else was just worse. So that's how it turned out.
By the way, obviously in FNATIC, you initially played the Winter split this season, which is the first one of the 3 mini splits that people don't remember. And then after that, you were out with the team and they brought in the Oscar, and then eventually at the end, you did the comeback we talked about earlier. When you had that first Winter split, and essentially your team was just completely irrelevant in that split, like they were just bad, they were losing all the games, right? How do you actually handle that? Because in your career, if we think about the years we're talking about before, dude, like a bad year really is like, I came 4th, just missed Worlds by 1 spot, or like, oh yeah, like I lost in the first round of the playoffs. Like, dude, to actually not even have the team be relevant, was it hard for you personally? Was it an ego hit? Did you even wonder, like, is it me? Am I playing like shit? Did you ever think any of these things?
Yeah, I mean, it kind of started already in the off season after Worlds, with us well, with how the management, I felt like made like a lot of questionable changes. To them, it was a lot about, well, the team was really dysfunctional, so they had to put the blame on like, well, coach, for example. I thought Yamato did like I would have liked to continue working with Yamato. I think the hurdles he had to overcome to be able to make this team somewhat functional was good enough. Like
Yes.
it's good enough to be able to work for a top contending team. That was at least how it felt like in my mind. But they had already set their minds on Crusher, who then became our head coach for Winter. And they, even during, I mean, this is out already publicly, so even during Worlds, they were like, we had a performance coach, I think, and yeah, I mean, a lot of people in the staff behind the scenes, excluding Yamato and one of our analysts at the time, actually pushed really hard for Rux to keep playing at Worlds.
Oh, right. Okay.
Because, I mean, Rux did have like more camaraderie with Humanoid, and he did like
Right.
he did not do. I mean, the issue with Rux was that well, in the games that we played, was that bot lane was really hard to play. Like Upset was, like he was down in CS a lot, but like we were just losing lane, right? More so than when we played with Hilly. But the game felt, maybe it was just a honeymoon, right? But the game felt like easier to kind of play, even if it was losing or if it was winning, because not a lot of random shit was happening.
Right.
So the management saw that, and then they were trying to push for Rux to play, and I think that's ultimately why he ended up actually playing in the following year. Which I think, I mean, I really liked Rux as a person, right? But I don't think he was the 10th best support in Europe at the time when he joined. So all things considered, he was just at the right place at the right time, stopping in for FNATIC, and they saw like glimpses of hope that he could be the one to turn like the shit show around. So I think a lot of things when it came to roster building just was wrong. I obviously pushed really hard to get Miki and Hans, but they understandably so went to G2. But yeah, I mean, after that, well, we were stuck with what we had. I think we ended up downgrading like a lot in bot lane. Not only just like player skill, but also just like depth of champion pool, which also ties into player skill, right? But we ended up, when we started in Winter, with like 3 locked bans, but we had hoped that we even had like 6 bans in the first phase, because we needed to ban pretty much all of bot lane matchups if we wanted to have like any hope of playing. I mean, that's actually not true. Like in the beginning, we wanted to try everything, but then when it didn't work, we just kept adding on to the pile of shit that happened. I think for me personally, I generally feel like I'm the last one to give up on the team. But this winter, I mean, I think everyone gave up probably before me, but when I gave up on the team as well, like because this happened in Winter, it was just a shit show, I think. Like once I started giving up on the team, there was just no coming back for how we played.
When you actually took this decision, or whoever took the decision, that like you're not going to play the next split, and then eventually, like if it wasn't for this injury, presumably you never would have come back to FNATIC. Like, how much of that was your say, was FNATIC's say? And when this happens, I've heard. I mean, obviously, Upset did a similar thing, but I've heard when you do that everyone, even really good players, say it makes you really nervous, because part of you thinks like, am I doing the right thing? Will this make people remember when I was good and I won't look bad on a bad team? But at the same time, if I was playing now when I looked good on the team, maybe they'd remember me, or will they forget about me? What would you say about this whole circumstance? Like, how much was your choice and what did you think of it?
Yeah, well, it ended really fast, right? Because we only actually played 9 games with the new format. I definitely could have played like way better, and I knew that as well. Of course, like you can always give the benefit of the doubt to players that have been on the top for so long. Like if they play 9 games with a dysfunctional team, can you really tell how good they truly are? So I didn't believe that I was like completely written off, you know. And from talking, well, I think one of the reasons why FNATIC did, well, okay, so I can just start from the beginning. I guess like after we did drop out, we had like a big group talk, we had some individual meetings, and then for me there was like complete radio silence for like 2 weeks where we were just staying in Berlin. And the break between winter and spring is not as long, you know, because they have to do 3 splits. So 2 weeks was quite a long time. I mean, basically, I think 2 weeks after, maybe like 3-4 weeks after that, the next split actually starts, you know. So there is not a long time period between those 2 splits ending and starting. And yeah, there was complete radio silence, and I was like asking around, you know, to my different teammates and all that, like, what do you think is going to happen? Because I did tell the management in my meetings that I wanted to change both coach, performance coach, and the bot lane if I wanted to continue playing. Or I mean, not if I wanted to continue playing, but this is what I would have liked to happen. And then after this 2 weeks of radio silence, I have heard like small things about, oh, maybe they want to try out this and try out this. And then I got like the full roster, or like the tryouts basically, which ended up being basically me and Thorin, and then same jungle, same mid, same AD, so Reckless, Humanoid, Razork, and then either Rocks or at the end. So it was basically just 2 academy players on top and support that they wanted to try out. And to me, I felt like, I mean, I didn't feel that it was weird that they wanted to try out me, but I just felt like the roster was pretty fucking, like it was just the same,
right.
or it was basically like this side grade support, but the same issues would still persist, and it was actually a hell fucking playing these 3 weeks, you know. It was, yeah, not pleasant to play at all. So to me, it was not like they gave me it kind of felt like they gave me an out, because like if you say, well, I want to try out you and you, what happens if I then, I wrote to the Dado this at this point, what happens if I show up to tryouts and I don't even want to play? Are you just going to kick me? Because if you had given me this, with everything I knew about the team, if you had come to me in an off-season and said, Wunder, would you want to play for this team, or do you want to be teamless? I would have picked being teamless. I would have picked sitting out compared to playing on this team like 10 out of 10 times. So this is what I told him. And then we ended up with the agreement that just drop the tryouts completely and stick with Thorin. Before that, he did try and convince me that this tryout to Oscar, which also seemed really weird to me, was just done as a courtesy to him because of his performance in academy. They were never actually intending to play with him. They would always pick me.
Right.
And then I was like, okay, I mean, I see where you're coming from, you know, give the guy a chance or something, but it also seemed like kind of weird. And to me, of course, I would always honor my contract. And if they told me, you know what, we want you to play no matter what, then I would have ended up playing in spring as well. But they did give me an out, and we did agree on me not continuing with the team. So when all is said and done, we did leave on a mutual decision. They made their decision based on what I told them. So I basically told them that if I had the choice, I wouldn't want to play for the team. If I could choose to be teamless, I would have done it. And they made their decision based on that. So I don't know if it's one side or the other. I think we both had our inputs, and we just chose to go separate ways in the end.
Right. When I ask this question, obviously it never happened. It's a purely hypothetical behind the scenes move. And it's based on things for example, if people don't understand how leaks and rumors work, this is why I hate leakers, because it could be possible, for example, within a team, people did say get player X, could be Wunder in this case, but maybe that doesn't mean anyone ever spoke to Wunder or there was ever an offer. So on the one hand, it was happening, but at the same time, it never was going to happen, if you know what I mean. So along those lines, though, I heard there was a rumor. Maybe you ended up in Vitality with Perkz again. Is this accurate? Was there a world where there was some options potentially on the table, or you could have maybe played? I'm guessing it would have been the summer split for this one, I'm guessing, right? So was it ever plausible?
Yeah, I mean, the issue with the format really as well is that there were issues in, for example, Vitality, right? And there were ways that they were trying to resolve it. I mean, it ended up as well with them benching Bo, right? So it was around the same time period. So yeah, I mean, the issue with this is that to sign a contract with a player when it comes from like an organization, to stay with them for a week, and given the results of the week, you could just end your split right there, and that's it. It's
Sure.
kind of not a move that a lot of people are willing to do. But it was definitely in the cards at some point. It was never official, but there were talks about maybe me coming in and trying to help a team out of their 9th or 10th or whatever place that they were in at the time, but never anything, never a concrete
Fair enough.
plan to do anything.
Fair enough. By the way, there is one player, you referenced him earlier, I did want to ask specifically about it, is Razork. Because, like you say, the problem is, like you said, initially when he came in FNATIC, it was sort of the scenario, obviously the same thing happened to Vethio and XL, where it's like, when you are like a really good player on a team that, they're still not that good, it's like, they're like 5th or whatever, but they sort of make the playoffs. Maybe we do overrate them, because if you're watching week to week in the old LEC format, you get super hyped off all the regular season games, don't you? Where it's like, really, like, if you don't do it in the playoffs, you haven't been to Worlds, for example, you're not actually that experienced player. So I will say, coming into FNATIC, he probably did have a lot to prove still. But considering what a shit show FNATIC was, like, for most of the time period he's been in the team, like, obviously this year was a joke, and then last year there were some problems, like we referenced. I actually feel like if I look at him over the whole time span, he's come through it fairly well, actually, considering he got blamed so much. Like, by the end, now, actually, he looked fucking awesome. Like, by the time Worlds came, maybe he was even the best European jungler. Like, what would you say? What is this guy's strengths? And also, give me like some of the flaws, because I'm pretty sure people have seen, he does seem like a fairly transparent player. Like, I can see after a game if he looks like he's demoralised, like upset, didn't go the way. He doesn't seem like he's a guy who hides it in that sense. So, who is Razork, the teammate?
Yeah, I think, I can even start with the flaws as well, because it ties into 22 quite well. I think for a big part of 22, I mean, he did get a lot of blame. Of course, I mean, you could talk about, is it ever deserved to get blame or not, right? I mean, in the case of him, like, contributing to the team, I think it's pretty deserved that he got a lot of blame. I mean, he was like I think him and Hilly, more so, I think me, Upset, and Humanoid, we are like more, we don't really care, like, emotions and all this. I mean, of course it matters, but it's like we can put that aside and just focus on playing the game. But Hilly and Razork especially, is like he let the emotions like drive him a lot, right? If the team atmosphere was shit, he would completely shut down. He also had a lot of like private issues that kind of carried on over to the game, and how he functioned and everything he provided to the team. So I think in 22 he had a very rough year. And I also joked about this with him when I then stopped in again here for FNATIC. Like, he was playing like a new person, right? He was actually really, really insane. Right. He played really well. I was like, where the fuck was this Razork in all of 22? But he had like some glimpses of, like, you could see that he was a good player, but he was just completely coin flip, and I think most of that came to, basically just like, the emotions and everything just taking over. Like, if he felt like he was getting choked out in a game, you could really feel it as well, and if he felt like the first 3 games were going like shit, there's a very high chance that he's not going to be performed. Like, you don't count on him to be the one that performs in game 4, 5, and 6. That's how it was when we played with him in 22. And I think he changed a lot since then. From the small amount that I played with him, so there's like almost only positives. Like, he is the guy that, like, actually when I play, I mean, he could be on his good behavior. I only played with him for 2 weeks, so it's like you don't really get to see the entire picture. But it seems like he's the guy that like pulls his team back as well, and like actually he is like one of the contributors of making the atmosphere good, even if it was in a bad spot, and also like not carrying the momentum with him, and doing a lot of good shit for the team. So in that sense, he improved a lot. Or maybe he was just suppressed in a way with the roster that we had, especially in Winter. He felt like really, like, you could feel like the choking out because of how he felt like he was restricted to play around bot lane to just even make it like to salvage. He felt like he was the guy who was just covering and making sure that we didn't get like fucked basically, and we didn't lose the game. He was the guy protecting us from losing, instead of being the guy he wants to be. That is like, well, making the proactive plays and all this kind of stuff, right? So definitely like a big contrast of how I perceived him back then to how I see him now.
One thing I think that you're quite famous for in your career as a top laner, I actually notice if you look at a lot of the great top laners in history, this is just a skill you've got to have in top lane, because spoiler, you just get fucking banged by the jungler all game, which is obviously you're really hard to dive. Like, you've had so many famous 1v2, 1v3 clips where you outplayed them. Sometimes you even just straight up win and get the kills and they're just fucking dead. Like, when this happens, a question I want to ask you is this, is I feel like when things become like a famous thing about a player, I'll give you an example. Years and years ago, I once did an interview with Froggen that was like this, where I said, everyone says you're like the hardest player like to hit with like skill shots or whatever, like you're good at dodging them or whatever. And then he said something weird like, yeah, but that's the weird thing. No, the other way around, that he was the best at landing skill shots, I think was the meme, right? And he said, yeah, but I almost feel like because everyone says that actually people like dodge worse versus me, because it's like they almost like second guess themselves in the scenario. Like they feel like, oh, fuck, he's going to dodge. So they end up doing things that actually are like worse players, essentially, to think that I'm going to do this. Like, do you think something similar happens when people dive for you? Do you think some of these players, like last second, like think, oh, fuck, what am I doing all this? Because some of the ways that like you win these outplays, some of them are sick from you, but some of them look like the player, the enemies just turn their brain off. Like, the second they go into the tower, like some of them just freak out or something. Do you think this is the case? Do you think you have a mind game against people if they dive you?
I mean, definitely right. I mean, if people, first of all, when people go for dives, it's usually because in an ideal world, there's no way of it not working out, right? Like, unless they kind of don't actually, like, they forget about something, or like they lose their brain. Like, there's the one against Vitality where, like, if they're just all there together and
yes.
wait, they probably just kill me, right? So there's definitely always, to outplays, there's always probably some sort of like misplay happening, or something that could have been done better. I do think though that, like, compared to most, I mean, I don't know. I just feel really comfortable and confident, and I don't like stress out when, like, basically if I made the decision to stay under a tower and I know people are coming and I see them, I don't like stress out. I'm trying to figure out how to get the best of the situation, you know, and I stay like confident. I don't care if I go like -1 death on the scoreboard. Like, it doesn't really matter to me, because that's the situation I put myself in. I don't know if every other top laner is like that. Maybe they get nervous and they freak out and they like randomly use their spells when they shouldn't do. There could be like a lot of things that play into that, right? But definitely, there's definitely some junglers I've talked to, for example, they say, oh, it's so hard to dive Wunder, you know, and for sure when they say it, I mean, it's just like a meme and all, but yeah, I mean, they will probably think about it. They will probably second guess themselves before they do it next time. So that always plays into it. I think when you're like, when it's like an infamous thing like that, it kind of plays into it a little bit.
One thing I actually love about League is, this is one area where I have a different take completely to a lot of the Western, like, people who do shows, which is a lot of people believe in League. If you ever hear coaches talk, for example, they almost make it like players don't exist. Like, it's funny that LS has this rep. Coaches are way worse for this. They'll act like the champions in the game are just the champions. It's like, well, then what if I were like player here? And I'm always like, yeah, but who's that player? Like, when you say like that Ziggs, is that Ziggs fucking like Faker or just, you know, fucking Billy, whoever the fuck from the RLs? Like, to me, that does matter. The reason why I bring this up is I actually do think when people are like, oh, this player plays champion X, Y, and Z, it's like there's a difference between the best players on those champions and just people who pick it in a random LEC game. So if I ask you about your Gragas, which is probably one of your most famous champions ever, right? What do you think, what should people look for that sets apart a really good Gragas from just like someone who just picks it in a random game? Like, is there a specific combo or something that you're always looking for? Like, if you see that, you know, this is like a really high level Gragas.
I mean, I think, well, me being the thing about Gragas being like one of my champs, I think it's more that Gragas does provide like a lot of things for the team, but if you're able to lane it, I mean, there was a period of time where it was like OP and everyone was playing it, but I guess before that, when I played it and nobody else was really doing it, I mean, if you're able to lane it, it's strong, right? So if you're doing good in lane, you're kind of chilling. And besides that, I think, yeah, I mean, I've been pretty good at like pulling the trigger. I see like a lot of Gragas players messing up like just simple engages or something like that, like E flash R or something like that, right? Or ER flash, which is, I guess, but yeah, I mean, stuff like this that sets apart normal Gragas players. It's just how you dictate the team fights. I mean, that's basically what you are, right? If you're, unless you're playing like a one-shot Gragas build, if you're playing like a little bit of more tanky or cooldown reduction Gragas, something like this, you are gonna be the one that impacts the team fights. And if you're a Gragas that doesn't impact team fights, then your champion loses a lot of value. That's, I guess, that's the best way to put it. Every game is of course different, so it's hard to kind of put it as a black and white.
Yeah, sure.
As that.
Right. Obviously, people will see as a theme. I've tried to like actually get you to characterize in different periods of your career, like what was essentially your relationship with competition, like before you were on the Champion G2, when you were on the Super Team, later with FNATIC, etc. So my question for you right now would be this. Unlike, obviously, like Jankos stuck around in G2 and got another title, Caps has stayed there the whole time, Perkz went off to NA, etc. Other people have had different career arcs, but your success has come with that G2 team. Since then, it's been like okay results, or like I say, I mean, for normal players, going to Worlds is still good, but like I say, for you, it's a step down, right? Where do you think you are right now? Like, does Wunder still think of himself as like, can you still, for example, hit like a new career peak? Could you be the best Wunder ever in 2024, for example? Do you think of yourself as, like you said it before, for you, you'd be all pro every split. So should you be on the champion team? Should you be winning more LEC titles? Do you need to win more LEC titles for the legacy you're talking about?
I mean, I'm definitely more motivated to win LEC titles because it's like I guess the further you are from like the longer time has passed before you win an LEC title, the more you really want it again. I'm definitely more motivated than I was even like 3 years ago to just play and prove myself. And I feel like, I mean, I even feel like I try to like I guess prove to people that I also feel that way, because of course I can give and tell every team like false promises about, oh, I'm so motivated and everything, but like in reality it was a big risk for me to, for example, like stop in for FNATIC again. I have chosen to go to like Korea and boot camp and all that, right? Like I want to show people that I'm in for it, and I also want to do it for myself because I am in for it, So in that sense, and also from when I stopped in, I felt like I have what it takes. Like with 2 weeks of practice, I can be one of the best. I have what it takes with a whole year to be the best, and that's what I want to be. Well, first and foremost, be the best in Europe and actually achieve the things that I want to do in Europe. But one of the big things as well is when I watch international games, it feels like the West is just, they are not really up to par at all compared to what they would be or what they should be in the past. So, yeah, I kind of want to bring that back as well. I mean, if anything, I want to do it for me, but it was also an added bonus that nobody has done it since I kind of stopped, right? So if I come back and I managed to outperform all the Eastern players, that would be kind of sick. So that's what I'm planning to do.
Right, this last question is mainly for fun, but I'm pretty sure people will be interested in your answer. Being as you've played with and against both of them, obviously the classic debate, it's like the Messi Ronaldo, is which is the EU GO? Is it Perkz or is it Caps? And obviously in their case it's even more fun because they played together for some of this. So what is your take? Who is your pick out of the two?
I think, as like a player in the game, I'd say Caps has higher highs consistently throughout the years. Caps does not like demand a lot, or like he doesn't contribute as much out of the game as Perkz does at all times. When I've played with both of them, he doesn't like. He's good with what he has, but he doesn't demand much more. I feel like maybe if everything is falling apart around him, he's not gonna exert himself as much to fix things. I mean, he will more than other players, but maybe not as much compared to Perkz. I think Perkz wants to, if he sees something that there's an issue with something, goes way more out of his way to fix it than probably Caps would. But I'd say overall, I'd probably give it to Caps by now. I'd say if you asked me maybe like a year ago, 2 years ago, maybe, like I would give it to Perkz. But I mean, it is fair to acknowledge that, well, both me and Perkz have been like publicly and also just like our own like the view of us has gone down like since the G2 days.
For sure.
Whereas Caps is still on G2 and they have also won, and he has won. He's been clutch in situations where, for example, in some of the games when they had Flak at Targamas Botlane, and Broken Blade was not performing as well, and Jankos was just like, it was basically Caps going into playoffs. They were not looking that good. He picked Ari and he like completely won with 9. You know, this is like recent times that has happened, and well, you can't say the same for both me and Perkz, like since the G2 days pretty much. I mean, he had like some Cloud9 times where he did have some clutch moments, but I think Caps has like surpassed him in that sense.
By the way, when this G2 Super Team was at its peak, did you actually think, because the thing I've always wondered about is like, okay, I'll give you the example. You know, way back in the day when LOL Esports used to do that, like 20 players going to Worlds, it was like the top 20 players, right? At the time, we all used to make fun of them if they put almost any Western player on, because if they're putting like Bjergsen on, it's like, I see what you're doing. Like the fan wants him to be on the list, but like really, is Bjergsen better than like BDD? Probably not, if we're being honest. You know what I mean? Like, the Asians are pretty amazing at League of Legends. But if there were years where people put, like, a Caps or Yanko, I always used to think that was fair. But my question goes like this. Do you actually think that, like, Caps, for example, when he was at his absolute peak level in scrims, whatever, was he actually as good or better than the Asian ones? Like, if he went against, like, obviously you went against Faker at times, was he actually better than those players just as a mid laner, do you think?
I think Caps has always been one of the best at well, if he was not, I would never say he was like the best mechanical laner. Like, I think there was always like at some points Rookie, at some points like Showmaker, Faker, maybe even maybe not in recent times, but some time ago, that were better than him when it came to that. But I think, well, they are kind of like, sometimes they are like kind of, they have like their thoughts and like their way of playing, and it's like in a box, you know, and Caps kind of like breaks out of that, like sometimes, you know, like he will have games like, for example, when we played against Damwon in 19, I think it was, where he would like play Yasuo and just like perma roam. Like, he would do fine in lane and then he would just be everywhere on the map, like, and nobody, like, even if you gave them our draft, like, their mid laner would not be playing like that, you know. Their mid laner would not like completely 1v9 like that. So I think that's like an edge Caps has. It's just like sometimes he just does some crazy creative shit and it ends up working out, and no other player who is as good as him would also do that. The players who are as good as him at like laning and all that would probably just play like the old school Joey way, where you get like CS lead, you use your push to get like control and you get like objectives, something like that, right? But he was actually just like completely taking over the game sometimes when he had like, when there was no business in him doing that, you know. There was no other players that would do the same.
Right, this is a bit of a loaded question, as in, I'm pretty sure this is just an alley-oop and it's obvious what the answer, but I'll ask it anyway, because you hinted at it earlier in the interview. As someone who wasn't just a top laner who plays a tank, like we're saying, like you weren't playing just basic bitch League of Legends 6 years ago, whatever. Like, do you miss all the things that were possible from top lane in the past? Like you said, before the world where you just go all the time to like posture mid into like dragon fight, herald fight, or we take herald, they take dragon, into who gets the baron positioning first, which is all League of Legends has been for like 2 years now at least. Back in the day, like you say, you could side lane, you could actually choose to give up the dragon. So like there was so many different things the way you could choose to fight on the map was different. Obviously, TP used to actually exist the whole time in the game, which was massive for top lane. One thing I know a lot of the modern top laners complain about is they sort of nerfed like getting behind in lane. Like you can just come back immediately. Like they can't make the same plays on you. So do you miss essentially what like the sort of versatility of what you could do from your role back in the day?
Yeah, I mean, you definitely touched on like a lot of the things that changed. Yeah, basically, I mean, the fact that you could be winning a matchup that maybe you shouldn't be winning. You could save your TP, you could then TP bot and get like a double kill on every bot. Right now, you're like, you win a matchup, maybe you run back to lane and you save your TP, but then you just base and you have to you TP anyways, because why the fuck not? Like, your TP is not going to be useful anywhere else. It's like kind of just a wasted summoners. But like in that sense, there's like a lot of things that you were able to do to, yeah, I mean, allow you to play other champions than you are right now. Right now, it's mainly just about you lane, maybe you fall about behind maybe 20 CS, maybe you are up 20 CS. But then in the end, it's basically like who has the better team comp and who plays the better setups around the objectives, and like who plays the team fights better and all this stuff, which is also fun, you know. But it has taken a lot away from the game compared to how it was a couple of years ago.
Sure. Right at the end of this interview, Wunder, do you have a final message for people, or is there someone you want to say hello to or thank?
Well, I don't really have anything else than well, most of the people watching this, I guess, they're gonna see me back next year. At this point of the video, like when you're watching this video, I guess you will know which team that is.
Yes.
But yeah, I'm gonna try my hardest to come back, and I want to be the best in Europe, and I want to use that to be I guess being the best in the internet in the world is also my end goal. But first step will be best in Europe and also doing well internationally. I think saying that you want to win worlds, of course, that's everyone's dream, but that's what I want to achieve. But at first, I need to prove myself, and to prove myself, that's what I'm gonna try to do next year. And hope everyone will, as Perkz will say, watch me, and I'll do great things.
Manga Tak.
Tusen tak.
I may not have the most supporters in the world, but the ones I do have are straight fire, and they include Mac Pugnaccio Rakula, Frisky, Ahmed Haju, Toucan, Tobias Bernasconi, Animosity, Tosh, Jensen Gore, and you know it always is a special thanks going out to Jerky's Minion. Do you want to suggest a topic or a guest for my show? Do you want to see things I say on my Discord, little piece of straight fire I drop in the Patreon-only channels, stories I tell people in the other ones? Do you want to ask a question in my monthly AMA? Do you want teasers? Find out who the next guests are for Reflections interviews? Maybe you want to be one of those people who takes part in the long-form discussion with me where we talk about whatever's on your mind in esports. Well, if any of those or more sound interesting, why not support me, put your money where your mouth is, and join the Illuminati today via the Patreon link in the description box below.